I've never been the kind of person to trust people online, but something about Rachel felt different. We met on a hiking forum. Nothing romantic at first, just sharing gear tips and trail photos. She was always helpful, always quick to reply, and her stories from the road fascinated me. After months of chatting, she suggested we meet in person for a short road trip across Colorado. She said she knew all the best hidden spots, scenic routes, forgotten ghost towns, off-the-map camping sites. I hesitated at first, but I'd been stuck in routine for so long I convinced myself it'd be good for me. I double-checked her social profiles. Everything looked real. Photos, friends, even tagged posts from years ago. When she offered to drive and said I could relax and just enjoy the ride, I gave in. We agreed to meet at a diner just outside Denver on a Monday morning. She showed up in an old green SUV that smelled like cedar and peppermint gum. Rachel looked just like her photos. Dark hair in a loose braid, calm eyes, faded hoodie. She smiled like we'd known each other for years, and I told myself to stop overthinking. We started the drive heading west toward the Rockies, and everything felt surprisingly easy at first. She kept the windows cracked to let the mountain air in and pointed out things I'd never have noticed on my own. The way she described the terrain was poetic. She said certain places remembered you, like they chose who they let in. I laughed it off, thinking she was just quirky. About an hour in, we took a winding detour she said she'd taken before. Something about an old fire lookout with amazing views. I didn't question it. The road narrowed and dipped into dense trees. She turned off the music and said she'd like to hear what the woods were saying. I nodded, though the silence felt too heavy. We passed a stretch of broken guardrail with scorch marks on the edge, and Rachel suddenly stopped talking. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, jaw clenched, hands tightening on the steering wheel. I asked if everything was okay. She didn't answer, just kept driving like she hadn't heard me. Eventually, she pulled over near a clearing that looked completely untouched. No tire tracks, no trash, no signs of life. "We'll camp here tonight," she said flatly. I looked around. It didn't seem like a real campsite, just a patch of flat ground with a few stones arranged in a circle. I asked if she was sure this was safe. She smiled again, but this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was no phone signal and no trail markings, just trees pressing in from every side. I helped her unload the gear, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up my spine. Rachel hummed quietly while setting up her tent, like she was lost in some old memory. I tried not to stare, but she moved like she'd done this 1,000 times before. That night, she told me a story by the fire about a hiker who vanished near this exact spot. Said people still heard him calling out from the trees. I laughed nervously and asked if she was trying to scare me. She just stared into the flames and whispered, "Sometimes they don't vanish. They just stop being seen." I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the wind rustled the branches, I thought I heard footsteps just beyond the tree line. Rachel slept soundly, or at least she pretended to. Her tent didn't move once, and no sounds came from inside. I kept the flashlight in my hand, pointed at the zipper, waiting for morning. When dawn finally broke, I stepped outside and noticed something that hadn't been there the night before. Small symbols carved into the trees surrounding the camp. I crouched down near one of them, tracing it with my fingers. It looked like a circle with a line through the center, repeated again and again. "It keeps them away," Rachel said from behind me. I jumped. I hadn't heard her unzip the tent or move. She handed me a thermos of lukewarm coffee and smiled like nothing was wrong. I asked her what the symbols meant, and she just shrugged, saying, "People leave things behind when they pass through." I wanted to press further, but something about her tone told me to drop it. We packed up and hit the road again, driving deeper into the wilderness. The paved roads disappeared, replaced by cracked gravel paths overgrown with weeds. Rachel seemed to know every turn without needing a map. She told me we were headed to a place called Bitter Hollow, an abandoned town left behind after a mining collapse. I'd never heard of it, but she said it wasn't on most maps. "Some places fall through the cracks," she murmured, eyes fixed ahead. I tried checking my phone again, but still no signal. The air grew colder the farther we drove, and the sky dimmed even though it was only noon. When we reached the town, I could tell something was off immediately. There were no birds, no wind, not even the sound of insects. The buildings were intact but looked untouched by time. No graffiti, no decay, like they'd been preserved for someone's return. Rachel parked and stepped out like she'd come home. I followed hesitantly, my stomach knotting with dread. We walked past a row of old storefronts and Rachel pointed out details like she'd been there recently. That used to be the post office. This was the bakery. I asked how she knew all this. She paused and said, "My grandfather lived here," before he vanished. There was something strange in her voice, fondness mixed with something colder. I started to feel like I shouldn't be here. Still, I followed her into one of the buildings, an old general store. Dust hung in the air, and the shelves were still stocked with canned goods decades old. Rachel reached for one like she knew exactly where it would be. I asked her if this was really a good idea. She just looked at me and said, "You wanted real adventure, right?" Then she turned and walked deeper into the store. For the first time since we met, I felt truly alone. Something about her posture had changed, less relaxed, more like someone waiting for something to happen. I didn't follow her right away. Something in my gut told me to turn around and leave, but my keys were in her backpack. I stood there in the dim light of the store, trying to listen past the silence. No footsteps, no voices, just the soft creak of wood settling, like the place was breathing. Eventually, I forced myself to go in. The back of the store opened into a narrow hallway, leading to a door I hadn't seen from the front. It stood slightly open, and I could see a flickering light inside. As I reached for it, I heard her whisper my name, not from ahead, but behind me. I turned around fast, but no one was there. My heart was pounding. I pushed open the door, half expecting to find her, but the room was empty. A candle burned on a wooden table, and beside it was an old photo in a frame. It showed a girl standing in front of the same store, but the photo looked over 50 years old. I stared at the photo, then looked closer. The girl in the picture looked exactly like Rachel. Same braid, same eyes, same half smile. I stepped back, breath catching in my throat, and that's when I heard the front door slam shut. I ran out into the hallway, but she wasn't there. Outside, the sky had turned darker, though the sun hadn't set. The entire town felt heavier, like the air was thicker. I called her name again, louder this time. No answer. I started walking fast, then running, checking each building. Empty. It was like I'd been dropped into a movie set with no cast. Finally, I saw movement in a window of what looked like the old town hall. I ran inside and up the stairs, calling her name. I reached the top floor and pushed open a door. And there she was, sitting in a chair like she'd been waiting for me all along. "You came," she said quietly. I asked her who she really was. She didn't answer directly. She just said, "I never lied to you. I told you I belonged to the road." Then she smiled again, and it hit me. She didn't look older. She looked exactly the same as the girl in the photo. Not similar, identical. I stepped back, heart thudding, but she didn't move. She just said, "Some places don't forget their people. They just wait until they come back and bring someone new." I turned and ran, bolting down the stairs and out the door without looking back. The SUV was still parked outside, keys still in the ignition. I didn't even think. I got in, started the engine, and drove, gravel spinning under the tires. When I looked in the rearview mirror, she was standing in the road, not chasing, just watching, like she'd done this before, like she always did. It took hours before I hit a real highway again. I didn't stop until I reached a crowded gas station in the middle of nowhere. I checked every photo I'd taken. None of them had her in it. Not even the one I thought we took together. Later I searched for Bitter Hollow. There was nothing. No records, no coordinates, not even ghost town forums had anything. Rachel's profile? Deleted. Messages gone. Like she'd never existed. But sometimes, I'll hear a song from that trip and feel the air shift, like something remembered me. I don't take road trips with strangers anymore. In fact, I barely leave town. And every once in a while, when I pass a dark road leading into the woods, I feel a pull, like something is still waiting for me to come back. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It started 2 days into our road trip through Northern California. My brother Josh and I had planned the drive for weeks, just the two of us, following the old highway through forested hills and coastal towns. We weren't close growing up, but this felt like a way to fix that. Just silence, music, and the road stretching out ahead of us. The first time it happened, we were somewhere near Mendocino. Josh asked if I saw the sign that said, "Turn back now." I looked behind us, just a weathered scenic Route 11 marker. He laughed it off, said it was probably just a prank, but I caught him glancing nervously in the rearview mirror for the next 10 minutes. I assumed he was messing with me. Josh always liked to poke at me, especially when I was driving and couldn't escape the conversation. But later that afternoon, it happened again. He leaned forward and asked, "Why did that sign just say, 'You shouldn't be here'?" I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. That night, we stayed at a roadside motel outside a small town, the kind with flickering neon signs and vending machines from the 90s. Josh didn't talk much after we checked in. He kept looking out the window, like he was waiting for something to show up. I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw him sitting at the edge of his bed, fully dressed, staring at the door. He looked pale, shaken. I asked what was wrong, and he said, "There was someone outside the room. They knocked, then whispered my name. I checked, no one there, and no footprints in the gravel outside." The next morning, he wanted to leave early. I asked if he was okay, and he shrugged it off. "Just didn't sleep well." As we pulled onto the road, I noticed him glancing at every sign we passed. I finally asked what he kept seeing. He hesitated, then said, "They've started changing. It's not just warnings now. They're remembering things." We stopped for gas at a place that looked completely deserted. While I was inside paying, Josh stayed by the car. When I came out, he looked shaken and said the billboard across the street had my childhood address on it. I looked, just an old ad for soda, sun-faded and harmless. Back on the road, he got quiet again. Not the bored kind of quiet, but the kind that feels heavy and thoughtful. He finally said, "I think they're talking to me. The signs, or something behind them." I asked what he meant, but he just closed his eyes and muttered, "I shouldn't have ignored them." I told him he was overthinking it, probably just tired from the long drive. But part of me had already started watching the signs more closely too. Not because I believed him, but because I wasn't completely sure I didn't. There was something strange about these back roads. Too still, too forgotten. We drove for nearly 2 hours without saying much. The trees blurred by in streaks of green and gray, and the road narrowed until it felt like it could vanish behind us. Josh kept shifting in his seat, tapping his knee, scanning every passing sign. I was starting to feel watched, even if I didn't know by what. At one point, he told me to slow down. I asked why, and he said, "The sign back there, it had a date on it. Tomorrow's date. Said last day to leave." I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing was there but a bent mile marker. "I think it's following us," he whispered, eyes wide. We passed a rust-colored bridge that groaned under the tires. On the other side was a fork in the road that didn't appear on the GPS. I told Josh we'd stick to the main route, but he pointed left and said, "That's the way it wants us to go." His voice didn't sound like a joke anymore. I stayed right. I told him we'd hit the next town by dusk and could rest there. He didn't argue, but he looked back through the rear window until the split disappeared behind us. I caught his reflection in the side mirror. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. We stopped at a diner that seemed frozen in time. Checkered floors, silent jukebox, faded booths. The waitress smiled politely but didn't say much. While I ate, Josh went to the bathroom. He was gone for 15 minutes. When he finally returned, he was pale and shaking. He sat down slowly, leaning in close like he was afraid someone might overhear. "There was a sign taped to the mirror," he said. Same handwriting. It said, "He can't see them, but they see him." His voice cracked at the end, and I didn't know what to say. I offered to drive for a while. Josh didn't argue. He just stared straight ahead, not blinking much. The sun was setting as we hit another stretch of road surrounded by tall pine walls on both sides. I noticed we hadn't seen another car in over an hour. I glanced at a passing sign. It looked normal at first, just a warning for falling rocks. But something scratched into the bottom caught my eye. Faint, almost invisible unless you stared hard. "Don't trust the one beside you." I didn't tell Josh. I just gripped the wheel a little tighter. Up ahead, the road curved around a narrow bend. Josh sat up suddenly and pointed. "There, did you see that one?" I asked what it said. He looked at me, confused. "You didn't see it? It said your name. Just your name. Nothing else." I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't. Not this time. The way Josh said my name, low, careful, like it was no longer safe to speak aloud, left something cold in my chest. I stared straight ahead, hands tight on the wheel, afraid of what might happen if I looked at another sign. The road kept winding deeper into the trees. The daylight was fading, but the sky didn't turn orange like it should have. It just dulled into gray, then darker gray, as if sunset forgot to show up. Josh leaned against the window and whispered, "I think this road wants something from us." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think we passed the same tree 6 times, and every time, the sign below it says something different. First it said, 'Keep driving.' Then it said, 'Closer.' The last time, it said, 'Choose.' I slowed down. We hadn't seen another car, person, or building in hours. My phone still had no signal, and the GPS had frozen at a blank screen. Josh suddenly asked, "Do you remember how we got here?" I started to answer, then stopped. I couldn't recall the last actual turn we took. He sat forward again, alert like a dog catching a scent. "There's another sign ahead." I looked, and for a second I saw it too. Not a metal highway marker. This was a wooden board nailed into a crooked post. All it said was, "Stop him." Josh was already unbuckling. I slammed the brakes, confused, shouting, "What are you doing?" He looked at me and said, "I think they're talking about you." Then he got out of the car, slamming the door behind him. He started walking toward the trees, leaving me sitting there alone. I got out and yelled after him. My voice sounded small in the thick silence. He disappeared into the trees before I could catch up. I stood at the edge of the road, staring into the branches, feeling like I'd just stepped outside of something human. Minutes passed. Then I heard him scream. Not loud, but sharp, cut off, like someone clapped their hand over his mouth mid-word. I ran in, flashlight shaking in my hand. The trees were so dense it was hard to move. I called his name again and again. Nothing. Finally, I found his jacket near a dead log. That was it. No trail, no footprints, no sound. Just cold stillness and that same carved symbol I'd seen earlier, burned into the bark above where his jacket lay. The circle, the line through it, Rue. I searched until morning. Nothing. I drove back down the road alone, eyes scanning every sign in case they told me where he went. Most were blank now, just rusted metal and peeling paint. But one stood out. It wasn't there before. It said, "You left him." When I finally made it back to town, no one believed my story. They said no one had seen us come through. The gas station didn't have footage. The motel didn't have a record. Josh's phone disconnected. His social media vanished. But I remember every detail. And sometimes when I'm driving at night on some forgotten road, I'll see one of those signs again. It'll flicker into existence just long enough for me to read it. The messages are different now. They don't warn, they ask. One keeps showing up more and more. Ready to go back? I don't usually remember road trips in detail, but that night outside DeRidder, Louisiana never left me. Something about that stretch of highway still feels like a scar in my mind. Silent, too dark, too empty. My friend Malik and I were heading home after a weekend in Houston, trying to shave hours off the return. We took a back road shortcut I regret to this day. It was just after 2 a.m., and Malik was half asleep in the passenger seat. I kept the music low and my eyes on the winding pavement. The road cut through dense forest, and even the moonlight struggled to touch the ground. We hadn't seen another car in at least half an hour, and that isolation had started to feel a little too heavy. That's when it happened. Something small, something pale, darting straight into our lane. I hit the brakes hard, swerving across the line, heart slamming against my ribs. The car screeched to a sideways stop. Malik jolted awake, and I sat frozen, staring at the empty road ahead where a child had just been. I jumped out, calling into the dark, breath fogging even though it wasn't cold. "Did you see her?" I asked. Malik rubbed his face and looked around groggily. "See who?" I told him a little girl ran into the road. He looked confused. "Man, there's nothing out here." She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, and I swear she was wearing a pale blue dress. It wasn't like seeing a shadow or animal. You know when your brain fills in the blanks. This felt different. I knew what I saw. And yet there was nothing but cracked asphalt and pine needles. We checked the edge of the woods with a flashlight. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a lost kid or even someone trying to prank us. But it was silent. No birds, no wind. Just the sound of our breathing and the weak circle of light bouncing off the trees. We got back in the car, both of us tense. Malik muttered, "That didn't feel right." I asked again if he'd seen her, but he shook his head. "Maybe you dozed off for a second." But I hadn't. I was wide awake. And now, completely unsettled. As I started driving again, we passed a small green road sign. "Welcome to Lee's Hollow." I glanced at Malek and he said, "This isn't on the route, is it?" I checked my GPS. Just a frozen screen and a blinking gray road. There were no turns. We hadn't left the highway. I looked at my phone. No service. Malik tried his too. Same thing. He said quietly, "We were supposed to be heading west." I nodded, gripping the wheel harder, but somehow we were headed east. The road hadn't changed, just our direction. We kept driving, hoping to reach some kind of gas station, town lights, anything, but the road didn't change. Just the same 2 lanes swallowed by pine trees with no landmarks, no houses, no exits. Malik kept glancing at the clock on the dash. It was frozen at 2:03. I tapped the screen and tried the radio. Static. No stations, no background noise, just the same soft hiss across the dial. "Dude," Malik said, voice tight. "This doesn't feel right, like we're looping or something." I nodded, trying to stay calm, but every mile we drove made my chest heavier. Then we saw it again. Standing at the edge of the woods about 50 feet ahead, same height, same pale blue dress, arms at her sides. I hit the brakes, and this time Malik saw her too. But before we could react, she stepped backward into the trees and vanished. I threw the car in park and jumped out. "Wait, don't!" Malik shouted, but I was already moving. I wasn't thinking about fear anymore, just confusion and instinct. I ran to where she'd stood, pointing my flashlight into the thick brush, but there was no path, no footprints. Malik caught up behind me, breathing hard. "What are you doing, man? We need to leave." I nodded slowly but felt stuck in place. There was something about that girl, like she wasn't trying to hurt us, like she was trying to warn us. I didn't know why I felt that. We walked back to the car in silence. I started the engine and the dash clock jumped to 3:11 instantly. My stomach dropped. Malik saw it too. "We were only gone a minute," he whispered, "maybe two." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to admit what I already feared. We passed the same Lee's Hollow sign again. At least it looked the same. But this time the paint was peeling and the metal had rusted through. "Did that age?" Malik asked. I didn't answer, just kept driving. We were both too afraid to guess. Another mile down, a sign appeared that hadn't been there before. It wasn't state-issued. It was handmade, the letters crooked and messy. "She's not the only one out here." Malik started praying under his breath. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. We finally saw a building, a small wooden gas station just ahead, lights flickering under an old canopy. I pulled in fast, heart racing, and we both got out. The pumps were ancient. The door creaked open by itself as we approached. Malik hesitated, then said, "Let's just see if someone's inside." The bell above the gas station door jingled, but the place was empty. No clerk, no customers, no sound. The air inside smelled like damp wood and dust, like it hadn't been used in years. A single bulb buzzed near the ceiling, casting long shadows across the counter. Malik called out, "Hello?" But no one answered. I walked slowly toward the back, drawn to a bulletin board pinned with faded flyers. Most were unreadable, but one stood out, a missing person notice from 1994. My breath caught when I saw the photo. It was the same girl in the blue dress. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. Malik saw my face and asked what was wrong. I just pointed. He stepped forward, studied the picture, then looked at me. "You saw her too, right?" I nodded, and we both knew we hadn't imagined it. Whatever she wasn't alive anymore. We didn't speak as we left the store. Outside, the lights above the pumps had all gone out. The sky seemed darker now, like something had drawn a shade over the stars. I told Malik to get in the car while I fueled up, even though the pump's screen was dead. Just as I picked up the nozzle, I heard gravel crunching. I turned toward the woods and saw movement, figures, several of them, standing just beyond the edge of the light. I couldn't see their faces, just outlines, still, watching. Malik saw them too and yelled for me to hurry. I dropped the nozzle, jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the doors shut. Malik locked his side, eyes wide. The figures didn't move closer. They just stayed there, half hidden, as if the edge of the darkness was holding them back. I turned the key, praying the car would start. The engine roared to life and I threw it into reverse, then peeled out onto the road. Neither of us spoke for miles. We passed no signs, no towns, just endless dark highway, as if the world had emptied behind us. But eventually, the trees thinned and a phone tower appeared. Bars returned to my phone one by one. The GPS snapped back to life and we realized we were an hour north of where we should have been. I pulled into a well-lit gas station on a busy road and parked. Malik got out, breathing like he'd held it for hours. I checked the dash clock, 4:29 a.m. It felt like a whole day had passed. I searched for Lee's Hollow on every app, map, and forum I could find. Nothing. No record of a town, a road, or a girl who matched that photo. It was like the highway never existed. We still don't talk about that night. Whenever someone asks why we don't do road trips anymore, Malik just says we took a wrong turn once, and I leave it at that. But I still have dreams about her, standing by the road, staring silently, like she wants me to come back. I think she was warning us, not just about that place, but something else, something worse still hiding out there. I don't know if we were lucky to get away or if we left something unfinished, but I've never taken that highway again, and I never will.